Oi, oi, Savaloy, we're back again. It's a painfully slow time in MMA right now. Well, I say that. All the news is dropping because they want to throw us off while we're doing our best of 22 recap shit. There was the Danis news yesterday. If you want an opinion on that, go check out Game Plan of the Year. And today, firstly, Danis has dropped out of his can't lose boxing match against KSI. You know, was going to make a ton of money, isn't even a boxer. No one would have complained that much. It's so weird. He dropped out and his manager said because he was underprepared, which is it's a new one for me. I've never heard that. I dropped out of the fight because I might lose, because I actually realised I'm not good enough to win this fight. I want to see that on his Tapology. Cancelled, Danis not good enough. So that man continues. It's got to be like a humiliation kink at this point. But the weirder news was that Jake Paul has signed to PFL to take an MMA fight. Good for him. I don't know what to make of it. Who do they find to fight him? I presume he's not going in the tournament. What weight does he fight at? Because he's not, he's going to be doing a proper massive weight cut, not a boxing weight cut. I think he's probably looking for another. He's got to sort of reset because he's gone as high as he can go in boxing without fighting someone real. And he did fight Anderson Silva, who's, he beat Julio Cesar Chavez's shit tier son, fail son, who was a world champion at one point. But now he's got to reset again. So back to the absolute worst MMA fight you've ever seen. However, this does tend to not work out. It seems to be a tougher game to pick up, and there's less actual bums out there willing to lose for nothing. As Claressa Shields found out when she went to PFL. And the other news was that Ariel Helwani mentioned that Bellator, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, might be looking for buyers. What a shit company. And you know that they're done because they haven't leapt on Jake Paul like the hottest thing since sliced bread. 5 years ago, they'd have been all over this. PFL wouldn't have got a look in edgeways. Unless Jake's signed with Ali Abdelaziz, in which case you're guaranteed PFL fights or UFC fights. But anyway, Bellator being up for sale, very funny. It is the Scott Coker move. Make a product, cash out. This time it's not even a good product. Strikeforce was objectively pretty good. Lots of mismatches, but not nearly as many as Bellator. And maybe it's because this product has stayed pretty much the same, and we're a decade on. Big John was never a commentator before, but now he is. Buying up Bellator, you get some interesting assets in terms of contracts. You also get lumbered with Josh Thompson and Big John and all sorts of other stuff that you probably don't want. But it might be worth it for the 20 or so good fighters who are out there. Anyway, let's talk about technical turnaround of the year. This one's my baby. It means a lot to me. Did my game plan of the year yesterday, and already people are disagreeing with me. They thought I should have gone with Volkanovski. I think something that I didn't mention that was more of a subconscious thing, to be honest, but I already think that Volkanovski's very good. I expect great fights, great performances, great game plans out of him. I don't really rate Calvin Kattar, and I never have. I've always been like, yeah, overrated, not that good, and that's what probably played into me being so pleasantly surprised by the Giga Chikadze performance. But if you're ready to disagree again, because we can do that, we're friends. We're going to talk about technical turnaround. It is a sort of not nebulous, but it's like most of these awards. It's kind of weird because actual technical turnarounds in people tend to play out over the course of longer than a calendar year, and not within the neat 12 months of January to December. So sometimes I feel like, well, a lot of that guy's best work was done last year, or he took 2 fights last year and 1 fight this year, or, understand that everything here comes with a pinch of salt. I'm really just trying to put some shine on guys who are, turning it around. It's in the name. And I've said this hundreds and hundreds of times on the podcast, but one of my favorite things about MMA is that because technical and tactical decisions mean so much fight to fight, guys can just change. You can think a guy is one thing and he could be a completely different thing. The examples I always give are like Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira being the most glaringly obvious one recently. but guys who just, they had 20 fights. They were well into a career, and then they just changed who they were for the better. And I'll leave I don't want it to be, it's not career comeback award. It's not just you were losing and now you're back on the horse. There are guys who win fights. There are guys who go undefeated, and then they'll change a significant aspect of their game and look even better. I think back to when I was raving about Volkanovski on his way up. He was largely just wrestling dudes. His kickboxing has gone from strength to strength in recent years. A lot of his early UFC run was cage wrestling, and he ain't lost yet. So, like yesterday, we went to the social media threads for the nominations. I've got quite a few here. I've bolded some that I'm really genuinely considering, but there's a lot that need mentioning. Lots of people say Marlon Vera. Don't really think that his problem has always been not doing enough, and he's still not doing enough for most of us to feel comfortable. He's doing enough that he has won his last couple, but I wouldn't call what he's done a technical turnaround. I'd say that he's just managed to build some momentum by picking up 2 good wins. Someone said Tyler Santos. I honestly can't weigh in on that one because I didn't watch her before she fought Valentina Shevchenko. I'm probably not watching her again. I really only watched her because of the Shevchenko controversy. But I'll take your word for it. Someone said Nunes versus Pena 2. I did say yesterday someone nominated it in all categories. So Nunes, technical turnaround, learning to fight southpaw. No, not going to give it to that one. Let's do... Lots of people asking for Dober. Dober's got some momentum, but again, do you think that he's technically turned a corner? Do you think that he's added a load of new stuff to his game? Do you think that he's got sharper? His last performance was him getting his ass kicked and gutting through it. And he's always been gutsy. I'm not considering that a particularly big technical development for him. Roman Dolidze. Okay, now we're getting into it. Because Roman Dolidze, I thought, was just a kicky guy with some wrestling. This year, he's pulled a blinder. He's played a ton of guard. He's fought a couple of guys who are better, maybe not better wrestlers than him, but who were able to take him down or stop him taking them down. Phil Hawes and Jack Hermansson both heavily rely on their wrestling. Hermansson got him down, which surprised me because Hermansson normally hits a brick wall with his wrestling and then loses all faith in his striking. But Hermansson got him down, and he was able to be so threatening off his back. He was using the K-guard where you underhook the leg. Often you push your knee in front of their body, their chest, from a closed guard. And then you can start inverting on the legs, or you can play a K-guard when they're kneeling, like Neil Melanson's always been advising people do. He learned it off Caro Parisian, hence K-control or K-guard. And even in that fight, Dolidze threw up the upside-down triangle that Neil Melanson's always talking about, put it in his book back in the day. I've been fucking around with it for a few years, but it is difficult to do. And then it changed beautifully with the leg attacks from that K position. And the leg attacks are, that's how he came up on the calf slicer against Jack Hermansson. And it's also how he ended up on that sort of backside 50-50 that broke Phil Hawes' leg. So yeah, man, we're going to talk about that in Breakout Technique of the Year. I haven't even got that listed down, but Roman Dolidze's K-guard has been banging. His hands look good against Hawes, even though he was fighting a one-legged opponent at that point. I thought he looked a little bit stiffer on the feet. Not stiffer, but his punches had more pop than I'd seen them with previously. If I have reservations about Roman Dolidze's potential, I think he struggles to mix it together very well. But I do like that he's aggressive in even the most disadvantageous positions. And I really do think he's come a long way in a few years. He lost a fight to Trevin Giles, who I don't think is tremendous, back in 2021, March, and he's on a 4-fight winning streak now. The Kyle Dorcas one, 3 of these in 1 year. I thought Kyle Dorcas was last year. He's done 3 since June. That's incredible. He fought Staropoli, was out for a year, and then Dorcas, amazing knee and knockout. And I thought he looked good up to that point in that fight too, with Dorcas, who's got good hands. The Phil Hawes one, which, crazy finish. Crazy that Phil Hawes just sat there and let him break the leg. It's going to come up in the but why, because when you're in like a reap or any position where your leg is being laterally pressured, even if the guy's not on the heel hook, you can't stay there, because if he just decides to spaz out and bridge or something like that, you can do damage to your tendons because you're putting lateral pressure on your knee joint. And then the Jack Hermansson one, in his most recent one, he's had a storming year. He got performance of the night bonuses for all of those. And he's been brilliant. Very serious contender for this award, I'd say. Someone suggested Kyler Phillips, who had an interesting... I mean, he only fought once this year, but he had an interesting one in his one fight. He fought Marcelo Rojo, who is not great, to be honest, 16-7. But he was rebounding from that loss against Rullian Paiva. You know, this is the crazy thing. Rullian Paiva, I do not consider particularly good. Smoked by Sean O'Malley in the first round, lost his last one to Sergey Morozov, you know, beaten by Rogerio Bontorin. He's not amazing. And Kyler Phillips was coming off that win over Song Yudong, where he looked fantastic. And Song Yudong, obviously, a very dangerous and legitimate fighter at that weight. So, yeah, when he fought Rullian Paiva, I think a lot of people were surprised just how sloppy he got. You know, spinning kicks from way too close, going backwards, falling over himself, tiring himself out, and letting Paiva get in the fight. Now, he lost the majority decision, so it was, I mean, you know, it's just one scorecard one way or the other. He could have picked up the win. Oh, no, majority, not split. But, you know, it's a close fight. The Marcelo Rojo one, he looked a lot smarter and more restrained. He was using combinations a lot. Looked, you know, he was basically a striking clinic. And it's kind of like when Michel Pereira gets serious. You go, oh, actually, this guy's not bad. It's a lot of the time, it's the fact that he does go for these bullshit techniques that prevents him from doing well. The downside of that, you know, when I was watching it was, firstly, Marcelo Rojo's not great. But secondly, he was entering, it was this constant rhythm. He'd go, step in, bop, 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 circle, step in, bop, bop, bop. No feints, no fakes, no trying to change angles on him. Very rarely entering with low kicks or anything like that, or just popping off a single kick and running. It was all enter with a combination and leave, enter with a combination and leave. And it was more because Rojo was covering up every time. It wasn't so, and not really throwing counters back very effectively. It was kind of rote, as Patrick Wyman would say. I need a Wyman siren. Do, 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 do. That one, you know, if you've got that sound clip, send it to me. So it was only one fight. I didn't think he looked too amazing, but it did seem like a conscious move to fight less spazzily. So, yeah, respect to Kyler Phillips. I was super impressed by how well he did, even fighting spazzily against Song Yudong. So if he can, you know, we're always talking about playing with the sliders. If he can level it out so that he's got enough weird shit going on, but he's still fighting fairly sensibly, he could be a force in this division. Someone said Patchy Mix. I think I honestly don't follow Bellator closely enough to tell you that he's made significant leaps and bounds as a technician. But I will say, when I watched him versus James Gallagher, I thought, you know, I was like two sloppy guillotine merchants jumping all over each other, giving up position, looking bad. Don't be silly, jump the gilly. And then he fought, you know, a much smaller Kyoji Horiguchi, but he wrestled him well. He did really well, you know, climbing on his back, cage wrestling and so on. And then he fought Magomed Magomedov, and he used the guillotine really well to come up on top. I think he finished with the guillotine, but every time he was using it to tilt and get on top first. He finished with the guillotine basically from the top position and going, oh, now I've got it, instead of just jumping to his back with the guillotine. So I don't know if he's technically got much better. I have not seen much of his hands or his kicking or anything this year, but I will say that this year particularly made me look at him more seriously. Hopefully when the Bellator is bought out by LFA or whoever, he gets brought into a more meaningful brand and we get to see more of him. Anthony Hernandez, very real. Yeah, Fluffy Hernandez. I'm going to have to look up his record, see how he's doing. So Rodolfo was last year. Josh Fremd and Marc-Andre Barriault this year. The Barriault fight I thought was gorgeous. Feints, combinations, boxing into wrestling, wrestling into boxing, breaking from clinches with strikes. His top work was fantastic. I just thought it was really beautiful. He looks like a guy who's finding his stride and becoming confident, putting it on, you know, under the ring lights. And, you know, it's a big step forward. I mean, obviously, Marc-Andre Barriault, not an amazing fighter in terms of like top 10 in the division or anything like that. But this guy was losing to Kevin Holland and Marcus Perez, who I don't think are tremendous fighters, and they're certainly very one-note fighters. In his last couple, he's looked well-rounded, technical, savvy. And against Marc-Andre Barriault, you know, he's only got one knockout on his record, but he was really taking lumps out of Barriault en route to getting that submission. Another guy who I did not take seriously. I thought even after the Rodolfo one, I thought not fluke, but you could beat Rodolfo that night just by being in good condition and surviving. He submitted him in the second round, but like it was clear that because Rodolfo was just not used to this, he gassed out hard. The two recent ones were much more convincing. I mean, Josh Fremd's not a super well-known name, but Marc-Andre Barriol I know well enough to go, damn, that's a fairly decent measuring stick. Nathaniel Wood, again, another sensational year. I've got to say, going through this list and then highlighting all the ones that I actually am considering for the award. I'm not considering like Kyler Phillips, Marlon Ferro, so on, but it's nice that people think that about them. I said that in a really passionate. It's nice. It's nice that you think he could win. But the number of guys that I got highlighted for very serious contention for this award, it really, because these are the interesting stories in MMA. I am interested when some guy comes out of Dagestan or the middle of America or whatever, and he's undefeated and he goes all the way to the title and whatnot. But I think I'm more interested when someone works out what was going wrong for them and they turn it around. And there's so many guys this year. We've had Delice Hernandez, Nathaniel Wood. Again, another sensational year. He's gone up in weight, which is always a dangerous decision because everyone hits harder. Everyone's much stronger. If you were a striker to begin with, the thinking in your head, it's like, well, you were as big as possible at that weight class, so you'd be wrestling better than if you went up a weight class and you were against bigger guys. However, it doesn't seem like that's the be-all and end-all. People like Robert Whittaker, even Kelvin Gastelum. Well, I mean, Kelvin Gastelum's a pretty decent wrestler anyway, but Robert Whittaker and other strikers like him have been able to go up and just use their conditioning and their scrambliness and their footwork and put it on people who should be able to wrestle them easily. And Nathaniel Wood's another one. I mean, he didn't... Charles Rosa and Charles Jourdain were not amazing wrestlers. Casey Kenny's a good wrestler, but that was a catchweight bout back in 2020, so he took a full year off, basically. Year and a half. Came back in July against Charles Rosa, beat the shit out of him. Low kicks, combination punching, body punching, that trip from the clinch, which he then used 100 times against Charles Jourdain. In both of them, just the variety on show. I knew Nathaniel Wood for a shifting right hand because that was basically all he did for his first 3 or 4 UFC fights. To see the amount of variety that he's got and how sharp and fast and also disciplined he looked in those 2 fights. Now, Jourdain gets a lot of respect for being fun, not super elite. Charles Rosa, again, a bit of a punching bag. But Nathaniel Wood is a fun addition to the featherweight division. And honestly, much needed. He's come from bantamweight, a division full of guys who are amazingly slick strikers and very dangerous. He's gone up to featherweight where the top 10 is aging out. And it's basically there for the taking for young guys if they can come up with a couple of interesting knockouts or highlight-filled performances. Zhang Weili's another good shout. I think I put her in consideration last year on the improvement from Rose 1 to Rose 2. This is another one that doesn't fit neatly into years because she's constantly improving. When she won the title, when she came into the UFC, she fought a load of bums in China and got some easy submissions. She came to the UFC, she was having awkward kickboxing matches with Danielle Taylor, Jessica Aguilar, and Tisha Torres. She was an inside low kicker and the occasional right hand. She'd take people down and they'd roll her over the top. She was not great. She banged out Jessica Andrade, realised she's really powerful. The Joanna and Jacek fight was just her throwing counter right hands. But then ever since, it's just been like adding more and more to her game. She's wrestling offensively. She's throwing both kicks. The low kicks and the wrestling and the little bit of deep half too in the second Namajunas fight. The low kicks and the wrestling. I mean, wrestling is something that you're going to have to work on, but the low kicks was something that you can take I guarantee you she could throw a good low kick with either leg. Never did. Always the one leg and always just like point fighting at a range. Henry Cejudo and his team there, Eric Albarracin, whoever his striking coach is as well, they had her looking for the right opportunity to land good low kicks against Rose Namajunas, taking punches on the guard or counter low kicking basically, and she did. And, it's a basic skill, but if you put it into a good game plan, it becomes very dangerous. However, that was November 2021. This year she fought Joanna Jacek, looked good. And then Cara Esparza, and the Esparza one's significant because her counter wrestling and her crucifix were what surprised everyone. Don't know. This is the thing. I'm super impressed with her. I'm super impressed with the direction of her career and how she's improving and learning every fight. She seems like a sponge. She's got the life that I want, just going around training with people and learning cool things and enjoying it. But I don't think if we're talking about this year, 2022, or last year as it is now, I don't think she's going to win this one, because there are some guys who've done some amazing stuff just in the last year. Not that, not saying what she did isn't amazing, but like guys who've made incredible turnarounds. Other interesting mentions. Someone said Bilal. Yeah, I mean, turn the intensity up to 10. That counts. His striking has looked better, to be honest. It's just so boring. I wouldn't be able to honestly judge his fights because I don't stay awake for him. Larissa Pacheco. Someone said got to mention her somewhere. And yeah, this is the thing. Like, she's on like a 4-fight knockout streak or whatever. She's not fighting the best competition, but she fought Kayla Harrison twice before and lost. She fought Kayla Harrison the third time and won. And if you looked at her in that fight, she knew what she was doing. She was doing good counter wrestling and scrambling and striking from the bottom, and even taking Kayla down a couple of times. You don't get a third chance against someone you've lost to twice to show how much you've grown before. Most people don't get that, at least. So, yeah, you can't argue that she hasn't made massive improvements this year. Whether you think Kayla was unmotivated, whether you think Kayla was focused on something else, whatever, she did the same. Well, she didn't do the same thing. She fought the same challenge a third time and did better. So, yeah, by definition of the game or the award, she should be mentioned. Not going to give it to her, obviously. Sergey Pavlovich, a couple of people mentioned. I think, you noticing him doesn't mean he's improved. What he's done is he's come out and he's swung as hard as he can. He's always had a very long reach and very heavy hands. I'm not even convinced that the Overeem of a few years ago who mugged him wouldn't mug him again. I've not seen him tested. Maybe I'm super pessimistic there, but he hasn't shown me anything new. Someone said Poirier learning to defend the rear naked choke, lol. Okay, other serious contenders for me. Nzechukwu. Kennedy Nzechukwu. I know. Because I shat on this guy. I thought he was the worst fighter in the UFC. I mean, there's a couple of contenders for that. There was, who was that massive roidy lad? Light heavyweight. Lost like 5 in a row before they cut him. And there was Sam Alvey, and there's been others, but I thought he was genuinely one of the worst fighters I'd ever seen in the UFC. Because his game was just like getting... Well, firstly, he managed to sit on top of Paul Craig in guard and not even hurt Paul Craig, not even land good punches. Where everyone else, there's always the chance that you could knock Paul Craig out before he triangles you. Kennedy Nzechukwu just looked terrified the entire time. But then his other fights were like him covering up, taking a beating, and just Homer Simpsoning his way to a stoppage. But this year he lost the split against what's his name? Negumereanu. Hope he never really becomes big because I don't want to say that name many more times. But then he beat Kara Burson by TKO elbows, but by wrestling largely. Then he beat Ion Cutelaba by, again, out-hustling a pretty accomplished Greco-Roman wrestler, I believe, like a national champion or whatever. And a guy who's massive front runner. I suppose that kind of was a match made in heaven, because Kennedy Nzechukwu is just will take an ass kicking and then come back. Even his losses, he tends to lose late. But I've been really impressed. His wrestling against Carl Robertson actually looked good, and Carl Robertson did stop Glover Teixeira taking him down. He did donkey elbow him in the back of the head a dozen times, but he managed to stop Glover taking him down. He had a lot of trouble with Kennedy Nzechukwu. So I say that as a guy who would never, ever want to watch Kennedy Nzechukwu fight. He's massively improved. Sergey Spivak, another one who I would never want to watch, but honestly, looked pretty good this year. He fought in March and August. He fought Greg Hardy and battered him, which, everyone always loves. But then he fought Augusto Sakai, and Sakai's a striker, and he did a really good job of boxing up Sakai when they were on the feet and then beating him up when they were on the ground. He's coming off a very quick loss to Tom Aspinall, who is a very dangerous striker, whereas Sergey Spivak is still sort of finding his feet as a striker. But against Sakai, he was hitting him with these jabs to long right hooks behind the ear over and over again, and setting up his takedowns really well. I've always loved how He chain wrestles really well for a heavyweight. He goes for things, goes for shots, comes up on clinches, hits inside trips or knee picks, and if he can apply that same tenacity and stick-to-itness to striking without being scared of getting just knocked out, things are looking very good for him. He was supposed to face Derek Lewis, who's the heavyweight watershed, whether you're good or not, in November, but that fight was cancelled, sadly. But yeah, I've been a big Spivak hater, and I have to admit that he's really turned a corner. Someone said Arnold Allen. A couple of people said Arnold Allen. And yeah, he's always been good, but he's finally beaten top competition convincingly. I'm just going to check who he beat this. Was this the year of Allen? Was this Dan Hooker, or was that last year? End of. So yeah, he beat Dan Hooker in March, and then he beat Calvin Kattar in October. I mean, the Kattar one was another exploding knee fairly early, and it was largely Kattar's fault, jumping knee at nothing. After already hurting his knee, I think. But yeah, I mean, I watched him against Melendez. Melendez, he looked amazing because Gilbert Melendez was just so done by the end. But he was having close competitive fights with Mads Burnell, even Makwan Amakani, to get to this stage. I was watching back his fight with Alan Omer, his very first UFC fight, and I was like, this guy is generic as hell. He's like a creator fighter. Step up, body kick, 1-2. And he's just looked so sharp in his last few. He's been hampered by having some, a fairly limited schedule in recent years. The Melendez fight he fought in July 2019, fought once in 2020 and once in 2021. But this year, Dan Hooker and Calvin Kattar looked fantastic. What more can you ask for? He's a lot of people's big hope for another British world champion. But I think a lot of people thought that he'd get it before Leon Edwards. But Leon Edwards snuck in this year with the knockout of the year. I don't have a knockout of the year, so I'm just going to award it to Leon Edwards now. But is there anything else we need? Oh, Nate the Train. Yeah, another one who I've been a big hater for. I laughed at the fact they were co-main eventing with him. But in his last couple, I've been really impressed. Because I watched him against Herbert Burns back in the day. I say back in the day, that was like 2 years ago. I'd seen some of his M1 fights. He moved like he was made of wood. The Darren Elkins fight, he's mean mugging, he's hitting him, but you're barely outstriking Darren Elkins. Darren Elkins is getting beaten up because Darren Elkins has no power and always eats punches. But then he got smoked by my boy Juicy J in under a minute again. So Herbert Burns and Juicy J smoked him in seconds. But against Ludovic Klein last year, he wrestled, he did well. He caught him with the anaconda choke at the end of the fight. Had a couple booked this year, gotten cancelled. Lerone Murphy, man, where's that dude been? But then he fought David Onama in a fight where $3 million may have been bet on David Onama by James Krause. This is it. This was the seed. Nate Landwehr fought David Onama, and he only got the majority decision, but I think he did much better than that. And what I really loved about him was that he was going in, using pressure, using his physical attributes, because he's always been tough and scrappy. And in people's face, but you can use that in a smart way. And if you just watch that Onama fight, he has mastered the move that I'm always moaning about and praising with Muslim Salikov, the shoulder feint and retreat. Because Muslim Salikov does it and then doesn't ever actually lead or jab. So he's just like, yeah, I'm coming in. No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm coming in. No, I'm not. And it doesn't work as well for him. And when people do lash out back at him, he lands a cool spinning kick or whatever. But David Onama would lose his shit every time Nate Landwehr faked at him and then step back. And Onama's swinging at air, Onama's sprawling on shots that aren't there, Onama's shooting bad takedowns, and Nate Landwehr just keeps walking in and beating him up. Wrestling looked great against a guy who is part of Krause's gym. They're very big on their wall wrestling. That's their bread and butter. That's how they get off. That's how they get out of the regional scene and into these mid-level UFC fights, so that I won't go into that. So that stuff that's accused can happen. But they're a solid gym full of guys who can cage wrestle really well. And Nate Landwehr is fighting out that weird Florida gym where they took Colby Covington and didn't really do much with him for that second Kamaru fight. But Nate Landwehr gets all the respect in the world from me for the last fight he had. I mean, there's only one fight in this year, but his couple of fights he's had, the last one in last year too. Yeah, he's really is actually turning it around. Who do I give it to? I think I'm going to give it to Nathaniel Wood because he was an afterthought for me. He was like a running right hand, and I don't really think he's going to get very far. He's made a little shake up in his life. He's, not even dieting more carefully. He can probably care about his diet less now, but, he's not draining himself dry on the scale, and he's looking phenomenal. I thought he looked, everything he was doing looked great. If he can do it against better fighters, we'll see. But I was really blown away by his performances this year. So, Nathaniel Wood, technical turnaround, winner 2022. Oh, I forgot to say who won these in the past, and that's why it's the important one. 2014, Dillashaw, 2015, Namajunas, 2016, Holloway, 2017, Whitaker. You're noticing a pattern, they all go on to do pretty amazing things. 2018, I gave it to, I couldn't decide, so it was Poirier, Cejudo, and Blachowicz, or Yan. 2019 was Gaethje, 2020 was Oliveira, 2021 was Brandon Moreno, and then this year, Nathaniel Wood. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about breakout technique or the Buttwire Award for Piss Poor Fight IQ. There might not be enough to talk about with technique that we just do both together, but I'll catch you then. Get to the Patreon to read extra stuff and all that stuff, yeah. I'm tired now. Cheers, bye.